Hi, my name is Jacob, and today we're going to be installing a headlight circuit relay on this 1983 Jeep Scrambler. The main reason why we're going to install the circuit relay is to make the headlights brighter. However, one additional benefit is that it's going to take a lot of the power draw that's currently on the headlight switch and remove that, divert it directly to the headlights, which then makes it brighter. So with that, let's do a walkthrough to explain what it's going to entail and how we're going to do it. Research is step one, and apart from YouTube videos, I found that these two books offer the best reference guide. This book by Michael Hansen, How to Build and Modify Your Jeep CJ, offers a great guide for a lot of things regarding off-road modifications, and most specifically, the headlight circuit relay wiring. The Technical Service Manual by Jeep is my go-to guide whenever I'm doing anything on the Jeep, and it has a great wiring diagram, which I'm using. Now, I took photocopies of these two books, the relevant pages of them, and this is the diagram that Michael Hansen provides. It's a great resource. This is the wiring diagram in the Jeep Technical Service Manual. It identifies the harness, the looms, the wires that connect to the two headlights. It's a good resource to have. I'm not going to explain how a relay works because that's been done in a lot of other videos. However, we're going to be using a 4-pin relay. Those 4 pins have number designations, and those pins connect to wires which then connect to various parts on the Jeep. Now, the 30 wire connects to the battery, the 85 to the ground, the 86 to the switch, and the 87 to the light. On my Jeep, the wires are colored as such, but on yours, depending on which wires you use, the colors may vary of the actual wires themselves. So now let's talk about some of the parts and pieces you're going to need. First of all, you're going to need 2 4-pin relays. Now, at the parts store, all they had for me was 5-pin relays, and that's going to be fine because we're just not going to use the center relay. When you buy a relay, you can have the option to buy the harness kit that comes with it, and I recommend that just for simplicity's sake. These plug together and make a really good, solid connection. And as you can see, what I did is I removed the 5th wire, the pin that connects to the wire that connects to the 5th pin, because it's not going to be necessary. In addition to these relays, we're going to need to get an inline fuse. This one is weatherproof, it's recommended, as well as the actual fuse itself. We're going to use a 20 amp fuse that fits into this guy right here. Furthermore, we're going to need some shrink wrap because we're going to solder the ends together, as well as some metal fasteners we're going to have to create to hold these relays under the hood, some plastic loom to hold the cables together, as well as some extra wiring, and naturally, like electrical tape, dielectric grease, and all the tools that you'd probably need to do any normal wiring procedure. As I mentioned before, we're going to be soldering these wires together. I'd never soldered wires together before, so after doing some research, I took some extra wire and I practiced soldering, progressively getting better and better and better until I finally got to the point where I could make some soldering welds that I thought would be appropriate for the job, like this. Nice and neat, not too much solder, but nice and tight as well. With that being said, let's do a walkthrough around the Jeep and see what we're going to get into. So this is the inside of the CJ-8. It's a pretty standard inline 6, really. The electrical wiring for the headlights is going to come down here. It's going to track this way in this loom. And as you can see, I already pulled out the high and the low beam. They're the gray wires that I identified from the lighting diagram in that service technical manual, the technical service manual. And those wires go currently directly to the 2 headlights. What we're going to be doing is installing these 2 relays, which I already mounted on the bracket. They're going to go kind of like this. They're going to connect to the existing gray lines. They're also going to be connected to the new ground and power lines. Those lines are going to run cross inside the grill up under in the existing wiring loom. They're going to come across, and then they're going to exit through a hole right here. I'm going to put them in a new electrical loom, and the ground line is going to come through, and I'm going to attach it to this starter solenoid bolt in order to give the ground. The red line is going to come. I'm going to solder the fuse to it, and then it's going to be connected to the battery side of the starter solenoid. That will basically complete the whole work, the circuit, for the lighting relay. The first step that I have to do is off the car, on the bench, solder the two blue lines, which are the grounds, together. They will ultimately be soldered to this white line. I also need to solder the two reds together, and then we'll solder them to the red line. So that is the first step. So these are the positive and the negatives welded together. What we're going to do is add a little bit of dielectric grease, put the shrink wrap together, and heat it up. Then the next step will be to put it on the vehicle. So here's a little bit of grease. Alright, so now we test which of the two gray wires that are on the Jeep are the high and which one's the low beams. Once we know that, then we can connect them. So I went ahead and mounted the relays on the vehicle, and I also laid out the wires where I wanted them to go. Before we begin, I wanted to mention a couple points. When you're wiring these harnesses together, always use the same gauge wire throughout, from the ground all the way through the relay to the positive. Also, when you're operating, do one relay at a time and one wire at a time. This way it reduces the chances of cross-wiring or getting them confused. I also like to do a neat and tidy job and label as I go. So the next step is to determine which of these gray wires is the high and which is the low. Once I do that, I will label the relays. In order to do that, basically what I'm going to do is snip one of the wires and turn the lights on, and that will determine which wire that goes to, whether it's the high beam or the low beam. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And then I'll turn the lights on to determine which one it is. Okay, so here is the new relay all wired up as discussed. Everything went as planned. The connections went well, and the first wire that I snipped happened to be the regular low beam. So I marked that on the relay, and then obviously the next one is the high beam. So I wired those up. The one difference that I'm going to do now is instead of taking these ground and lead wires and running them in the existing harness, I'm going to use some new conduit and just run it across the grill as discussed and come out on the other side and then proceed from there. So this is where the wiring came out, and so far so good. The next step in the process is to take this inline fuse and attach it to the red wire. I'm going to put it somewhere about here, and it's going to pop out of the conduit and it'll look real nice. Then I'll attach another red line coming out. It will have on its end this attachment here, which I will fix to the battery side of the starter solenoid. For the ground, which is the white wire, I'll attach this to it and attach it to this bolt right here to complete the ground. With that being done, the wiring should be complete. The next step is to take the battery, reconnect it, and then test the whole system to make sure it works as designed. Now that the lights have been tested, this is how it all looks. The battery is reconnected, the wires are connected to the starter solenoid with the fuse in place. They run across the front grille and over to the relays. The relays are all taped up and nice and tidy, and they're also labeled.
For comparison's sake, this is the headlights on the vehicle before the headlight circuit relay was installed. Notice that the passenger side headlight is a little bit dimmer than the driver's side. This is probably due to the voltage drop that occurs in the wiring harness between the lights. This is the brightness of the headlights after the headlight circuit relay install. It's considerably brighter, and the passenger headlight is still a bit dimmer than the driver's side, but that might be due to an alignment issue or maybe because it's an older bulb. But generally, it's much better than before. And this is with standard bulbs, not with halogen or higher performance bulbs or LED. So the relay is really worth the extra effort. It's brighter, safer, and it offers better visibility and better performance. So it's a good bet. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it makes it easier for you when you decide to do your install. Thanks for watching, and have fun out there.